What do you want to know?
Well, tell me why photography? Tell me why Mexico? Tell me the whole story.
Well, I was born here in Ireland and I grew up in a beautiful place called Connemara, right here by the Owenmore River. I developed a love of the water from a young age. My family and I were always dipping into the sea or into the lake opposite our house. My mum actually had a saying, and we still quote her on this: "You'll never regret a swim," is what she always used to say. I studied art in England. I got certified in scuba diving and I found my passion, which was underwater photography. I wanted to dive and take pictures, but I wanted the colour. I found Mexico. I needed to find a way there. I sold my car, I Skyped my mom, I bought a camera and a housing, and I just went there. Life was good, I was taking pictures, I was travelling and enjoying life. And then the winds brought an extra bit of warmth. My sister emailed me with a great proposition: travel the most untravelled part of Mexico whilst working for a production company, finding locations and collaborators for a well-known television series. How could I say no? An all-inclusive ticket to adventure. Little did I know that my stay in Baja was going to take me to a place I'd never been before. A magical place that was both intriguing and defying, and a place that would change me forever. I'm from Ireland. I've been surrounded by rain and forest my whole life. You know, in the forest, life is lost in the abundance of life, just like the trees get lost in the woods. Deserts are something different. Here, life stands its grounds and screams, "I'm alive," whilst trying to survive. During the recce for the TV shoot we worked on, we were taken to remote areas in the desert that offered value to the shoot. Our guide was this 83-year-old fisherman with the strength and wisdom of a 1,000-year-old tree. He drove us through dirt roads and valleys and across cliffs to take us to the forsaken corners of the peninsula. Of course, in our off-road journey, our car broke down twice, but the skills of this man of the sea and of the desert got us through it with no sweat. It was there I learned the special kind of person this environment requires. It made me think of home, of the people I grew up with and whom, when presented with adversity, they would thrive on what they would have handy: a hammer, a rock, a piece of rope and a determined mind. I remember Rodrigo's face when I said to him, "Baja reminds me of home." Baja is, at least, Baja Sur in most of it, barren deserts populated mainly by cactus in which rain is at best a rarity, and most likely absent. In Ireland, especially in the west where I'm from, it rains almost every single day, and the landscape represents that. Lakes and rivers are all over the panorama, and the mountains account for every shade of green. Trees are a rarity as well. Our landscapes are barren, a different kind of desert, a drowned one, but nonetheless a desert. We were travelling across the country by car from south to north. Our plan was to visit Rodrigo's family for Christmas and then to carry on west to Baja to work our second year at the whale watching camp. We had bought a used car for the more than 4,000-kilometre trip from Tulum, Quintana Roo, in the Yucatan Peninsula, back to Baja in the north. We were a few days from Christmas and we decided to take it slow and visit some interesting spots along the way. It was the best plan ever. During this trip, our car broke down in the middle of the mountains on Christmas Eve. The location was remote. This small town of Camargo in Querétaro was surrounded by the mountains. Less than 900 people live here, most of them old men and women and young kids, as most of the younger men are gone away to work. Christmas brought back these men just to be with their families. They had travelled north and crossed the border, some of them illegally, to find a way to sustain their families, even when this means leaving their loved ones behind, and risk their lives crossing a border beset with drug traffickers, border patrol, and trigger-happy ranchers who see these men crossing the border at night as game animals with a mark on their backs. For me, as a photographer, this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, as we were stranded in this little town in the middle of nowhere, and with no mechanic available due to the holidays, we were welcomed by these locals and their families, and it was amazing. The town was celebrating the Posada, a typical Mexican celebration that takes place during the weeks leading up to Christmas night. Every member of the community is involved and they bring the fiesta out onto the streets. Every corner of the town is lit with fireworks and improvised street lights. People cook and feast on the street where everybody shares what they have. For that night, small towns like Camargo become one big family, and we were a part of it. One of the most memorable Christmases ever. Years back, while I was working in Bristol at the TV production company, I got to know very interesting people in the field of wildlife filmmaking, underwater photography and filmmakers like me, whose offices are the coral reefs and the barren deserts of the peninsula. I finally found my tribe. I first met them through the hundreds of emails that convoy a TV production. Later, when I moved to Mexico, they were the only people I knew and I wanted to visit. I first came to Baja on a week's visit whilst I was travelling through the west coast of Mexico, right before the shoot. So later, when that TV job came up, I was more than happy to go see them again. So I did. We had fun, we went diving, and it was there that Johnny told us he owned a whale watching camp north of the state, and that he was also planning on selling his camper van. At that moment, I didn't really think much about it. When the TV shoot was done, Rodrigo and I decided to stay, and we needed to sort something out, what to do, where to live. And I remember Rodrigo asking me, "Is Johnny's van still for sale?" It turns out it was. Our first belonging as a couple, Rodrigo and I, was that camper van that later would be crucial for our life in Baja. We moved into our van and we explored a little in order to find a place where to settle. We would find this place in the southernmost tip of Baja, called Cabo San Lucas, a beautiful beach town turned into a tourist stop for cruise ships and visitors mainly from the US. Whilst working there, I remember Johnny's words about his camp and his need for guides to run it. Those words stayed in my head, circling around. A remote, desolated lagoon, surrounded by an unforgiving desert, inhabited by migrating whales having their babies, was a very powerful image whilst working in the overcrowded beaches of Cabo San Lucas. I contacted Johnny and asked him about it, and the job was available, so we took it. San Ignacio is located where the north and the south states of Baja meet. The lagoon is a 40-mile off-road drive from the main road where the desert meets the ocean, and its unique conditions are home both to resident and migratory species. Life in the lagoon is not easy, even for the families that have decided to call it home. Today, the lagoon is part of the Vizcaíno Reserve, the largest natural protected area in the country. And while the whales brought protection and regulations, the help came late in the game, and you can see the scars of human endeavour even in remote places like this. Nonetheless, and after a long legal, political and social struggle, the Vizcaíno Reserve managed to preserve the endemic and migrating species in the area that make it one of the most magical places on Earth. Rodrigo and I spend 2 months every winter alongside the whales, working in one of those whale watching camps. It is a time of retreat, hard work but personal isolation as well. Whilst we take people on whale watching trips and host them, the remoteness and solitude of the area, along with the amazing stories of determination and endurance, make it so special. A medicine of sorts for the soul sick with the modernity and rush of our days. The lagoon is surrounded by sierras and canyons, where cave paintings with more than 7,000 years embellish the walls, showing the history of Baja's first inhabitants, now frozen in time. These are the pictures of ancient people and their families, depicting what once was sacred for them, and now forgotten. Scenes of hunting and gathering the land, supernovas and shooting stars in the night skies, alongside the wildlife that surrounded them. A journey into the primordial way of living as a society before the great religions, the tribe. Making this trip is no easy venture, and it took us a whole day of driving into the mountains just to get to the nearest village. From here on, there were no roads, and ahead of us was a 7-hour trip on the back of a mule down into the arroyos, where these pieces of wild art dwell. Our guide was a local rancher, born and raised in those mountains. Juan was the young father of 2, also owner of the burros that took us down into the canyons, and a goat's cheese producer when in season. Juan didn't speak English, and his knowledge about the place was diluted in local folklore, halfway between history and myth. He knew everything there is to know about life in the top of those mountains, but just like everyone else, he had more questions than answers about the creators of that millennial rock art. Our first night we camped some 2 hours from the painting site. We didn't have a tent, we didn't want one. The stars in the night sky commanded attention, and an unusual warm wind allowed us to need nothing more than our sleeping bags and an open fire. There I could see the patterns in the stars we now call constellations, which marked the pass of time in a sort of cosmic clock that would set the beginning of our time measurement to this day. Being here in the mountains has enabled me to connect with that elemental self we all are. The one connected to the earth, the sea and the stars. The one who is part of the whole and that is hiding within us all. Mexico has given me the opportunity to look inside myself through the world around me. My roots are Irish, but like everyone else, we branch out into the world we live in through the people and experiences around us. Our countries share many things in common. A pre-colonial period of a culture of our own, lost after invasion. A colonial period where religion, language and culture were the seeds of our modern identity and the scars of a cultural struggle that remains to this day. But we also share the love for a simple life, the strength in family ties and the power of our roots. I remember the words of a Clifton man who not only saw in Mexico a friendly nation, but defended it from invasion at risk of his own life. Captain John Riley of the St. Patrick's Battalion. Be not obscured by the prejudice of a nation, America, which is at war with Mexico. For a more hospitable or friendlier people than the Mexicans, there exists not on the face of the earth, to a foreigner and especially to an Irishman and a Catholic.
Yo ya me voy a morir a los desiertos, me voy de ejido. Y esa estrella marinera solo en pensar que ando lejos de mi tierra y no más que me acuerdo me dan ganas de llorar. Pero a mí no me divierten los cigarros de la Dalia. Pero a mí no me consuelan esos tragos de aguardiente. Solo en pensar que dejé un amor pendiente y no más que me acuerdo me dan ganas de a mí no me consuelan esos tragos de aguardiente, solo en pensar que dejé un amor pendiente y no más que me acuerdo, me dan ganas